Hello, my name is Tom Reck, and I'm a partner at Withum and have a focus on business valuation and forensic accounting. I'm also quite active in the automotive niche of the firm, and I am joined today by Michael Semanie of the law firm Killgore, Pearlman, Semanie Squires. So, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your practice, where you're located, areas of specialty, so on?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Like Tom said, my name is Mike Semanie. I have the practice is located in New York and Florida. We have offices in both places. I also practice in New Jersey and DC, primarily focusing on automobile dealers. And so for motor vehicle dealers, we handle everything from manufacturer relations. On the M&A side, buy sells. We do consumer issues. So really across the board, legal representation for motor vehicle dealers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So the reason for us getting together today is there's been a lot of activity by Ford as it makes its move from internal combustion engines to the EV market. And it does seem to have its sights set on Tesla as its main competition. But Ford recently unveiled a couple of options, or actually three options to its existing dealer group. The one was essentially they could do nothing, and at basically January 1 of 2024, no longer be able to sell electric vehicles. They'd be strictly ICE or industrial vehicles, basically, is what they'd be able to sell. Option number two would be the Model E certified, which would require a $500,000 investment, and it would allow them to sell 25 EVs per year. And then the third was, or is known as the Model E Elite. Initially, I had seen the price tag associated with that at $1.2 million, but I've seen some more recent information that makes it look like it's actually $1.4 million in terms of the initial investment. So, Mike, this is quite a big investment that dealers are being asked to make. And I'm just curious, based on what you know about what's being touted by Ford through these options, if there's anything that you'd like to discuss in a little bit more detail that might give dealers some hesitation.
Yeah, it is a big investment, and it's a big investment for any dealer. But when you talk about investment relative to size of the dealer, it can be very big investment for the smaller Ford dealers. Ford broke this up into, like you said, Tom, three different sections. The first one that you talked about, where there's nothing that the dealer needs to do, and they're not going to get any EVs, they've called Ford Blue. We always think about blue oval for Ford, but this blue feels a little bit more like blue being sad because you got nothing to sell. You have no EVs, and you're not going to get EVs until you want to potentially enroll at the next opportunity in the future in 2027.
Yep.
So that is seriously an issue for a lot of dealers who don't believe that the investment is warranted based on their financials and what they project for their market. If they don't do it, that's what they're going to be in Ford Blue and not selling any EVs. The E certified, I kind of look at this a little bit like they broke it up into you get no EVs to you get to basically service EVs, and we may throw you a few EVs to sell, and then you actually are going to be an EV dealer. So for the middle one, the E certified, you're really looking at being a service and parts and customer service, customer experience type of a dealer for Ford EVs. You're not going to have any inventory. You're not going to have any EVs on your lot to sell. You're not going to have any demos. So you can't, show you the vehicles to anybody necessarily. You can't, it's not going to use it like you normally have demos in a dealership. And so that really kind of puts a crimp on your sales. And because of that, if you're in that middle class, that E certified class, you're only going to be able to sell up to 25 EVs per year, and those are going to have to be done online, right? So you're a bit of a second class citizen for the EV dealers for Ford. The elite, the certified elite, those are the dealers who are actually going to be Ford dealers, right? Those are the ones that are going to be able to sell the Ford electric vehicle products to customers. Those ones are going to get, if you're in that class, you're going to get some inventory, you're going to get demos, and your inventory allocation is going to be in line with these pro formas that Ford is putting out for each dealership. And that's where, Tom, to your point about the initial investment being 1.2, maybe looking more like 1.4, in that category, there's still going to be a determination of how many chargers Ford wants you to install for them. So that can fluctuate as well. This is the initial upfront cost that we're talking about. We're not talking about the cost over time. We're not talking about the $75,000 a year it's going to cost to train people to use these chargers and how to properly maintain them, et cetera. So this is all we're talking about with that. And I think that's a point for dealers to understand, because I have heard dealers saying, hey, look, that's my investment for this. Well, hang on, it's not your investment. That's your initial upfront cost. Your investment may be much greater than that, depending on how things unfold. So those are some of the things that I think that are going to be important for dealers to understand about the program.
And what's interesting about it is, and let's stay away from the financial side of it just for a moment, but I've heard some folks say that at the rate that technology is changing, that the chargers that are being installed could essentially be obsolete in basically by the time they're installed, for lack of a better way of putting it, which makes you question, well, okay, well, if I'm putting in $1.4 million, let's say now, to your point, what does that really equate to? Is it $1.4 million now plus another, make up a number? I mean, what's it going to be moving forward? And that's scary as well for people to then have to make that decision without knowing. And another aspect of this is too, there's been talk of certain states going, or not going, but disallowing the sale of internal combustion engines or new combustion engines after a certain year. And I think most states that are talking about it are talking about it in the year 2035. That being the case, I mean, we're quite a ways off from that. So the other question becomes, is there going to be the demand that Ford thinks there is going to be? I mean, you could be making $1.4 million investment and essentially be sitting on your hands, not seeing any return on that investment. And then what? So that's another consideration. I don't know if you have anything to add to those thoughts, but those are mine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think you're spot on that. The obsolescence issue for these chargers is a real serious consideration. I have a problem buying an iPhone because I know I'm going to have another one coming out in the next couple months, and I'm going to be behind the times now, and I'm not going to have the newest iPhone. That's fine. That's a $700,000 purchase. Now we're talking about 1.2, 1.4 million.
Right.
It's a big difference to put into something that's a burgeoning industry. It's something that's just coming into sort of its own and fruition. And sure, there are states that have said that have, put out legislation and some aspirational visions of I want to be all electric by 2035. I've seen bridges that legislatures and local governments have said they were going to have built in 3 years that are still being built 15 years later, right? So you take that with a grain of salt. Sure, that's great. If we want to try to do that, fantastic. You have to really though consider the accuracy of those projections and the accuracy of those the statements about the obsolescence of these chargers. These chargers are not I don't want to get too in the weeds on the technology of it, but the chargers are the level 3 chargers, and they sometimes call them DC chargers. The level 1 is kind of the kind that you plug in at home, and you can charge your vehicle at home. It doesn't take anything special. The level 2 is a little bit more a faster charge. It gets your vehicle charged a lot more quickly. Level 3 are the fastest ones that they have now. And so anytime you look at any of the technology related to these level 3 DC chargers, inevitably it says that it's the fastest that's currently on the market. Well, that's for a reason, because this is developing very quickly.
Right.
I think dealers need to be aware of not just the obsolescence of it and how fast that may or may not approach, but also to the extent you've looked at any of the existing level 3 chargers, how much maintenance those require, and how much how often are those breaking down, how much is it going to take to I gotta fix this now, this part of it, and I have this issue. And it's one thing if Ford were saying, we want you to have sufficient chargers based on your size dealership and your needs to be able to, if you're selling EV products, to, you're going to be servicing them too. So we want to make sure that you can charge them back when you give them back to the customer. Fine, those sorts of things I get. That's not what the program is, though. The program is that there's going to be chargers that have to be made publicly available. And that's a big concern as well. From the legal standpoint, certainly there's liability issues there, at least potential liability issues. But even just from the cost standpoint and from the structure standpoint of the program itself, I have a real hard time believing that some of those features, like for example, the making an EV charger publicly available, like having not really much differentiation as between different size dealerships. You have to put this money in, and then you're in the program. It doesn't take necessarily account for the smaller dealerships, what they need. A lot of state franchise laws for dealers, in my opinion, would prohibit that. So that's something that I think dealers really need to consider. Ford's given dealers a very short time frame to determine whether they want to accept this and where they want to be in this whole process for going forward. I think it would behoove dealers to really quickly get up to speed on some of these requirements and at least know what their options are, right? In many states, the law is that, hey, look, you have to, a manufacturer has to give me, for whatever line make it is that we're talking about, the mix of the models available under that line make, with the caveat that as a dealer now, I have to be able to reasonably accommodate that through service and through my equipment and everything and my facilities. Some of these things I don't think are a reasonable accommodation for just being able to sell EVs. Having a publicly available EV charging station does not appear to me on its face, regardless of what size dealership you are, to be something that would be reasonably tailored to allow dealers to sell electric vehicles. It would be similar to when internal combustion engines came out. Manufacturers weren't requiring dealers to build gas stations across the country to basically build an infrastructure so that could happen for the entire industry. And it does appear that Ford is sort of going that direction where, from a competitive standpoint, from what, for a lot of different aspects, Ford Motor Company is essentially having dealers foot the bill for developing this nationwide infrastructure.
Yep.
For Ford then to be able to say, look what we did. Look, if Ford Motor Company has the best infrastructure for the electric vehicles, you can buy a Ford and you can do all this stuff. That's great, but that's all on the backs of dealers. There's no Ford money going into that. That's all Ford dealer money. So that is a little bit typical of the franchisor-franchisee relationship that we see in a lot of different industries.
Right.
But it really is a lot here in this one.
And you touched upon something a moment ago when you were talking about, the size of the dealership. When you're looking at a $500,000 investment, at a 2% pre-tax profit margin, I mean, what are you talking about? $25 million worth of sales would have to be generated from ICE engines to generate that sort of profit, right? And if you're going to talk about $1.2 million investment, then you're talking about $60 million worth of sales. And then if you really want to get silly and you want to talk about, well, what am I really going to be making on these EVs? What are you going to be making? $700, $800 a unit potentially. I mean, I know I've seen some of the pro formas indicate the numbers being higher, but I don't know that I buy into those numbers. And the other thing that I found interesting is when you look at the pro formas, you will see that there's a line on there for the amount of money that you can expect to get on a daily basis for charging people to use your chargers. $40 a day. So, I mean, think about that for a moment. You're asking someone to invest over $1 million, and part of your calculation for ROI, you're relying on $40 a day in terms of charging fees. To me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I wonder, and maybe you could shed some light on this, is is there more than one motive here by Ford? So in other words, yes, Ford is looking to foot the bill, have the dealers foot the bill for the infrastructure being built out. But is there more to it than that? Are they looking to get rid of the smaller dealers? I think is the $64,000 question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to wonder whether there are some ulterior motives there. And one of the things that was an issue before is with Ford spinning off its EV unit as
Hmm.
a separate business. That was it's interesting. In the financial press, you see about how that is, it's for financial reasons, and you separate that out, and you got different opportunities for financing and different things along those lines. I think to a person, every dealer that I've talked to said, no, it's not. That's not why they're doing that. It's every state has laws about franchise relationships between manufacturers and dealers, and every state says you can't be a manufacturer and retail your vehicles in the state. There's a dealer network that you have to go through, and you have to have a franchisee, et cetera, et cetera, if you're a manufacturer that has these franchises. States that have implemented the electric vehicle statutes, New Jersey is a great example. They have their statute allows for direct to consumer. I mean, you're manufacturing the vehicle and you're selling it directly to the consumer without going through a dealer. Only if the manufacturer sells only EVs, right? So it can't be a manufacturer that sells mixed internal combustion engine vehicles and electric vehicles. You can't just say, hey, I'm gonna go direct to consumer in my EVs.
Right.
It has to be a company that only manufactures EVs. Well, it's interesting that Ford spins off their EV line to be a company that only manufactures EVs, right?
Yep.
Is that something that they're looking towards? At the same time shrinking their dealer body while they're also doing, going through the potential, at least what appears to be potentially positioning this part of the company to go direct to consumer. It's reading tea leaves a little bit, but it is interesting how all of these things do line up. And to the extent they get a shrinkage of their dealer body, to the extent they get dealers saying, hey, look, we can't justify, because of our dealership structure, the way that our finances are, to invest this kind of money for EV sales. Is that something that positions Ford to be able to say, look, it's not even feasible to do it through a dealer network, right? Now we can meaningfully do this to where we can give consumers the electric vehicles that they want. We just can't feasibly do it through a dealer body, so we have this other company. We're going to go direct to consumer on these. May or may not be what they're doing, but man, all the outward appearances do seem to line up with that angle.
And I get the sense that a lot of the other auto manufacturers are sitting on the sidelines looking to see what happens with Ford. Is that yours as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is going on in a lot of different areas. I mean, you have the Volvo Polestar, you have, a lot of different, manufacturers looking at how is this going to work, and maybe some soft spots. There's Ford is a little bit out front in the way they're doing this. I certainly would, if I'm General Motors, or if I'm Hyundai, or if I'm whoever else, let's see we'll see where the soft spots are. Does this work in certain states but not others? Let's how's this all going to unfold when Ford goes forward with this program, and what do dealers do? How do they respond? It definitely feels like a sort of a watershed moment, a turning point, to where for the dealer network and for the industry, it looks like it could be a very strong industry. It's still going forward, but I think it's something that where dealers really need to don't take it too lightly. Like, if this is the time to be able to say, hey, look, this is something that's coming down the pike. Is my investment in this dealership at risk, and how do I protect it? If that means protecting it through having one or more dealers, protest these through state laws, whether that means having your state trade associations getting involved, all of the above, trying to make sure that the concern that I have, and again, so I only represent dealers I'm on the board of National Auto Dealer Council, and we only represent dealers in this, so that my interest is only protecting them. And it feels like it's a very interesting moment where they need to be very mindful of what's going on. And if it ends up being an overreaction, I would rather have them go out and protest and through administrative channels, then have their investment subject to this risk.
Well, it's interesting. I don't think it's an overreaction on our part. As a matter of fact, when I first started to read what was expected to be coming down the pike and what ultimately did come down the pike, it alarmed me. And I'm not an owner, but we have many clients that are. And when you look at, so beyond the initial investment, you talk about, I think it was a $75,000 a year and to be spent on ongoing training. Then you're talking about a digital sales sheet so that when there's an actual transaction, Ford knows what the vehicle sold for. There's going to have to be the maintenance of the equipment. My understanding is that at trade-in, the dealer does not get to establish the value of the trade-in. Ford gets to establish the trade-in. And at the very outset, you have this whole transparent pricing model. So to me, it would seem that if you have two dealers that are relatively close in geographic location, after they've spent this $1.2 million, $1.4 million, whatever the number is they've invested, you know, if one can undercut the other's price by, $300, $400, and Ford will let them do it as a result of this transparent pricing, your bottom line, you're getting squeezed. No matter how you slice it, you're getting squeezed. And I guess the question, in my mind becomes, if this comes to fruition, shouldn't dealers be as upset, for lack of a better way of putting it, or as concerned about it as you, me, and many others in the industry are? Because to me, it seems like we are on the precipice of a fundamental change shift within the industry. And maybe I'm overreacting, but that's my sense as to what I'm seeing and what I'm reading.
Yeah, no, I share that feeling, and it's, that transparent pricing that is an issue for me as well. There's a couple issues on the where Ford's getting into the retail side, that is an issue for me. The fact that they could potentially require dealers to only sell Ford extended warranties versus the dealer's own service contracts, or from whatever a service provider they want to choose to sell their service contracts, to have to sell Ford extended warranties. That is a bit overstepping, and I think it would violate several state laws. The transparent pricing is just, it's an interesting one. It's, they haven't been as descriptive as I would like them to be. But essentially it's a set pricing. And so if you sell your vehicles at X amount, that's what you're selling them at. And so you're not deviating from that for anything. That raises a couple issues. One, it's another one of those pieces of, we talk about, you pile up the evidence, and there's a pile of logs there, and whose ever evidence is higher, it looks like that's what's going to happen. That's another piece of evidence on the pile of, that's how you do direct to consumer. That's, it's a set price. This is the price. You're not going to the dealership talking to your sales guy, trying to figure out how you negotiate a deal. It's a set price, and that also does look a lot like a direct to consumer type of a model that's being implemented. But also it relates to, is there a potential there for antitrust and some price fixing issues? If it's something where, let's say dealers set their own prices, but they're seeing what the other guy down the street does, and a lot of our dealers, when they're competitors, they're our competitors, but they talk, they still have discussions. And so now if I have a discussion with my competitor about pricing, and we change our prices based on that, that is an antitrust violation all day long. So there's issues with that I think dealers need to be aware of for it going forward. Things that, like we often see, it's not something that someone did intentionally wrong, but if you don't know the difference, you can make a mistake pretty easily and get in some hot water here. So yeah, the transparent pricing or the set pricing is an issue. The extended warranty is an issue, certainly, but all these definitely add up to where the fact that Ford's giving dealers such a short time to make a decision here about what they want to do is certainly cause for concern, and I would certainly would as a Ford dealer, if I were a Ford dealer, be very concerned about that.
Yeah, and when we say short time, we haven't said it's October 31st, correct?
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah,
coming up very quickly.
right, and this dictate for lack of a better way of putting it, only came down beginning of October, very end of September. So you had about a month to make that decision.
Yeah, very, very short term. Not enough time to where you would have the, to go and really meaningfully digest what the program is, know all the details about the program, sit with counsel who can kind of help you, understand whether it does or does not comply with state laws. Sit with your CPAs to figure out, hey, does this pencil if I wanted to do it, does it even make sense? It's unfortunate that there's such a time pressure on it. But that's, yeah, deals were given a very, very short amount of time to comply.
And it raises another interesting question because now, so let's just say you decide to make the decision of not going either the Model E certified or the Model E Elite. You decide you're just going to sit back until if you have to wait till 2027. Do you think there'll be any repercussions for dealerships that opt not to do anything now? I guess that's the other question that's running through my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and dealers know, and it's interesting, there's outside looking in, there's laws saying that manufacturers can't, retaliate against dealers for certain things. Just after seeing it so many times, we all know they do. I mean, we all know that there's the opportunity there sometimes for a manufacturer to say, you want this model that's flying off the lot, like selling like hotcakes. But remember that lawsuit that we were in, or remember that, that time that you refused to do what I wanted you to do. We don't have that model. We have this model, and it's only in pink, and there's no air conditioning, right? I mean, it's
And you're in Florida.
and you're in, exactly. So we know there are times where at
Right.
least the appearance of retaliation can happen. I would not, the fact that there's going to be what they're calling an enrollment for 2027, I don't know. It's hard to know exactly what that's going to look like, but I would have a hard time believing it's going to be a very egalitarian process where everyone is treated kindly and nicely. It feels like, based on the fact that this was the first enrollment period for this was such a short period where dealers don't have time to really digest the issues. I don't know what that second period is going to look like, but it doesn't feel good.
Now, just out of curiosity, and this is strictly a legal question, is there any sort of time frame that's established either by state law or whatever, where uh, dealers, if they're going to file a lawsuit or a complaint, is there a time frame in which they have to file by, or no?
Yeah, it's so each state is a little bit different, because there's different processes for different states. Typically, there's a period where, and it's like essentially a statute of repose, meaning it's kind of like a statute of limitations, but essentially it's, if you don't bring your claim by this point, you're not going to be able to bring a claim. That's something that dealers need to be aware of because of this short time frame. They're really going to be under the gun for making a quick decision about what they want to do. And, it's not a decision to take lightly. It's something that, they really do need to sit with all of the stakeholders, they're the dealership owners. They need to talk to the CPAs and the lawyers and the bankers and figure out really get the contours of the program, get the idea of what's going on here, how best under that particular state laws that we could contest it if we need to contest it. And then if you do, go forward with doing that, whether your local trade association, other similarly situated dealers may be able to participate in one way or another with it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So, last question I would have is, what has the reaction been from the folks that you're representing? I know frankly, I've heard of some dealers that think this is great, it's the way of the future, and they're all in. And then I've heard others that are saying, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right. And so
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what are you seeing, and what are you telling your clients?
No, I think you're right. I'm seeing very similar reactions. I think it's, it tends to be, from what I've seen, the larger dealers who are saying, this it's fine. This was going to work. We're going to do this. This is going to be great. Looking at, this bigger picture of, if Ford does have this massive infrastructure after all this of across the country, these charging stations at Ford dealers that are open to the public, et cetera, that's potentially an advantage for Ford dealers that are selling those products. It's one thing to be able to say that, though. It's another thing to be a mom and pop dealer where you have I'm not making those kinds of returns, and I can't spread this cost across a number of stores. This is my investment. This is my life, savings, and my life's work is going into this. And really now the face of that investment changes drastically based on this, where I think it makes a big difference, and the big versus small is a lot of times the larger groups have their investment horizon is much longer, right? They're saying, hey, look, 2035, whether it does or doesn't happen where everything's all electric, let's say there's going to be more electric vehicles on the road, we're going to be positioned better by doing this now than doing that, even if we in the meantime are only selling maybe 3% of our vehicle sales are EV electric vehicles. There's going to be a period there where it doesn't make financial sense because the market penetration of those vehicles, or the market share, I should say, of the electric vehicles doesn't make sense for that kind of investment. Expecting it to grow over time, okay, that's my time horizon. This will make sense eventually. The mom and pop dealers and the smaller dealers just don't have that. They can't sustain that type of. I'm going to go through this lengthy period where I'm making an investment that's not going to pay off, and I know it because that product doesn't have the market share it needs to have to make it make sense. That's I usually see it kind of dividing down those lines.
And for the rural dealers, there's probably no need for them to want to do this at all.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. Well, that's all I have. I mean, those are my questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Mike?
No, I mean, I think it's just something where, again, it's going to be it's a dealer to dealer situation, because the most of the analysis that a dealer is going to do about whether this makes sense to me is going to be on that particular dealer, their financial situation, their market, and their state laws. If their state laws, prohibit some of these things, like I imagine a lot of them are going to, it's going to be a matter of whether they want to be, the ones out in front. It's not uncommon for, if there's a group of people who are hurt by something, no one wants to be that one to go out in front of everyone.
Right.
You stick your head out. So whether we have dealers that do want to do that or not, that's going to be a question, a dealer by dealer question. But it is something that, just looking at it at face value, it seems at least potentially premature, right? If this were a more mature market where I'm selling this many electric vehicles per year, okay, it warrants that means it warrants some sort of investment in this infrastructure. We're saying invest in this infrastructure, and maybe sometime down the road, we're looking at 2035, might start to make sense. It's just premature from that standpoint, as far as a program for the dealers to participate in, from my point of view.
Now, as a member of NACD, are you getting any feedback on what the reaction has been by dealerships to Ford? Are there X% that have already said yes, or X% that have already said no? But any feedback on that, or no?
No, not really any preliminary numbers, like as far as what they're selecting as far as what category to go in. Anecdotally, just from talking to people, talking to dealers and talking to folks in the industry, I know dealers are kind of waiting till the last minute, as far as what I can tell. They want to see what's going to happen. Is someone going to go out there and challenge that? If they are, maybe that's something that I don't have to choose right now then. And that's sort of the hopes of what a lot of what I've been hearing, is if someone is going to go out and really kind of stick their neck out potentially, and challenge the program itself.
You haven't heard anything by way of class action lawsuit or anything, have you?
I've not heard anything. No. I know there's been certainly some rumblings and some discussions. I know I've spoken with a couple of dealers who have want to know more about what that could look like. But that's there's not, as far as I know, there's been nothing filed as of yet.
Okay. Very good. Well, Mike, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you coming and speaking with us today. And I know how busy you are, so thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Be well.
Take care.
Bye.